There is a kind of silence that lives beneath everything you say. A quiet tension between what you feel and what you can explain. You speak, you move, you choose, but something deeper seems to be pulling the strings. You tell yourself you're one thing, but that identity shifts and shadows when no one's looking. Are you who you are, or just the result of every contradiction you've survived? Somewhere along the way, the pieces stop fitting, and no matter how much you try to rearrange them, they refuse to form a whole. You keep searching for the real you, not realizing that what you call you is not a place to arrive at, but a battlefield, a process, a becoming. Hegel didn't come to reassure you. He came to make sense of the wound, and to show that truth itself does not descend fully formed, but emerges slowly, painfully, through the things that break us. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was born in 1770 in Stuttgart, at the tail end of the Enlightenment. He was a contemporary of Beethoven, Hölderlin, and Schelling, but also lived through the rise and fall of Napoleon, the violence of the French Revolution, and the slow unraveling of Europe's old order. To Hegel, this chaos wasn't just politics, it was philosophy in motion. He believed history itself had a logic, and that truth wasn't some eternal idea hovering outside the world, but something that unfolded within it, through conflict, through time, and through us. He wrote the Phenomenology of Spirit, the science of logic, and the philosophy of right, works so dense they're still intimidating centuries later. But beneath the complexity is something deeply human, a vision of how we come to know ourselves. Not in isolation, but through struggle, through others, and through history itself. To read Hegel is to enter the long tunnel of becoming, and to realize that you are not a finished being, you are only just beginning. You think you are an individual, a self-contained, thinking, choosing being. But for Hegel, this was the first illusion. The self is not an island. It is not pure interiority. It only comes to know itself through recognition, through the other. He explains this through what's famously called the master-slave dialectic. Two consciousnesses meet. Each wants to be acknowledged, not as a thing, but as a self. But to be recognized as a self, you must risk yourself. You must assert your being, even in the face of death. One submits, one dominates. The master gains control, but the recognition is hollow. Why? Because the slave has become an object, and objects do not give meaning. The master depends on the slave for recognition, but the slave is not free, so the master cannot be seen as truly himself. The one who serves, who works, who shapes the world, he begins to transform. Through labor and suffering, the slave slowly becomes conscious of his power. He gains selfhood through endurance, through shaping the external. The master stagnates, the slave becomes. This is Hegel's radical insight. The self is born through struggle, through contradiction, through the other. You are not simply yourself. You are the result of every confrontation, every resistance, every mirror you've ever looked into and recoiled. What you call I is a wound stitched together by history. It is the echo of battles you've long forgotten. And that's why the more you try to find the final version of yourself, the more you disappear. Because you were never meant to be static. You were meant to become. We're taught to imagine truth as something fixed, a clean, final answer waiting somewhere outside of time. But for Hegel, this is the second illusion. Truth is not a thing, it is a movement. Reality itself, from logic to nature to society to selfhood, is not static. It is always becoming, always tearing itself apart, only to reshape itself at a higher level. This is Hegel's dialectic, not a mechanical formula of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, but the deep structure of unfolding, a rhythm inside all things. Everything that exists contains within it a kind of tension, an internal contradiction that demands resolution. And that resolution is not a return to harmony, but the birth of something new. You do not escape contradiction by avoiding it. You escape it by going through it, by letting it destroy you, and by watching what survives the fire. In Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel describes consciousness moving through stages, from sense certainty to perception to understanding and beyond. At each stage, it believes it has found the truth, but each truth collapses under its own weight, revealing its incompleteness and forcing the mind to evolve. This is not failure, it is growth. Alienation, misunderstanding, fragmentation, these are not accidents. They are necessary steps in the evolution of spirit. We only become conscious by confronting what we are not. We only understand freedom after losing it. We only glimpse the absolute by passing through the broken. And this doesn't just apply to individuals. Entire cultures, philosophies, religions, all go through this dialectic unfolding. Each era believes it holds the final answer, but each one sows the seeds of its own undoing. And out of that collapse, something larger begins to stir. Hegel called this the labor of the negative, the difficult, painful work of contradiction that shatters illusions, so that deeper forms of truth can rise in their place. To think dialectically is to think like the world itself, not in fragments, not in still frames, but in motion. You are not one thing, you never were. And truth, if it's to mean anything, must live and move with you. You are not alone in your becoming, because everything is becoming. Your life, your mind, your culture, they're all expressions of something deeper Hegel called Geist, often translated as spirit or mind. It's not a ghost or a soul, it's consciousness in motion, the world becoming aware of itself, piece by piece through us. To Hegel, history is not chaos, it is reason unfolding in time. Every war, every revolution, every broken ideal, they're not meaningless events, but necessary chapters in a story of freedom struggling to know itself. At first, spirit is trapped in nature, then it awakens in individuals, in myths, in art, in religions. It begins to think, it fragments, it doubts, it rebels, it builds empires, it burns them down, and slowly, through every contradiction, it moves forward. History, for Hegel, is not a cycle, it's a spiral, revisiting the same questions, but on a higher level each time. And freedom, true freedom, is not doing whatever you want, it is knowing what you are, and aligning yourself with the truth of the whole. This is where his idea becomes dangerous or liberating, depending on how you see it. You are not outside history, you are history. Every choice you make, every word you speak, carries the weight of the past and shapes the future. You are not just a product of spirit, you are its instrument. This doesn't mean surrendering yourself to the collective. It means understanding that the individual only becomes real when they realize that their part is something greater. The absolute, Hegel's ultimate term for truth, is not a god outside of time. It is what arises when the fractured world comes to understand itself. So maybe it's true that you are not who you think you are, but that's not the tragedy, that's the miracle. You are not a finished being, you are the contradiction that will not die. You are the wound through which the world becomes conscious, and in that wound, something eternal is unfolding, slowly, painfully, beautifully.